Every autistic YouTuber on here that talks about media has made a video at some point regarding autistic representation, which honestly makes a lot of sense. There are a few canon autistic characters, even if most of them are either questionably handled or downright malicious, so a lot of autistic folks, including myself, tend to gravitate towards the coded area. Now, coding as a concept is on its own something that deserves its own video, but that is not something I'm actually talking about today because I think the character was intended as a representation of autism, even if that is not the term that they used in the game. And considering these discussions are revolving around autistic people, and we also tend to, skew on the nerdier side, you'll see a lot of people discussing anime and video games and cartoons and just general nerd stuff, so it is really genuinely surprising that I have rarely, if ever, seen discussion on who I believe to be, hands down, without a doubt, the best, most accurate, most tragic, and most empathetic representation of autism that I have ever seen. Is this video an excuse to infodump? Yes, because that's what all these videos are. Is this also going to be a vehicle for me to force people to get into this series? Also yes. Let's talk about her. Let's talk about Maria Ushiromiya from Umineko When They Cry. So, Umineko no Nakukoro ni is a murder mystery visual novel written by acclaimed VN writer Ryukishi 07. Now, I'm not trying to say that Umineko is some obscure series that nobody has heard of before. It isn't. It's one of the most popular visual novels of all time. It's mostly a clickbait title. Leave me alone. But I hadn't really heard of it until like 2 years ago. But that's because I don't really see it talked about outside of visual novel fans. I think the only insanely popular VNs on my side of the woods are like Doki Doki Literature Club or Ace Attorney, or whatever gets a popular anime adaptation, I guess, and technically a lot of gacha games, but I digress. It's shocking how popular this visual novel is, but the discussions feel so insular. So, yeah. Basic rundown of the plot is there's this crazy rich family called the Ushiromiyas in like mid-80s Japan, and they own this island, and all of them join together for their yearly conference, and as you can guess by the genre that this is in, things go south real fast. I feel like that description almost undermines how impactful and just important of a read this is, but just imagine if Succession was also Twin Peaks, and had delicious notes and flavors of anime shit on the side and within. Does that motivate you? Please read it. I'm begging you. Please. Umineko is one of those things that people recommend you go into knowing as little as possible, other than, well, I guess these trigger warnings for the series. I don't want to ruin somebody's brain unprompted, but only worry about these things for this video. But I'm kinda gonna break that here. This first part will be me discussing information given in only the first episode and how she is portrayed. Realistically, people will only get into a given work, especially one this fucking long, Jesus Christ, if they know at least one thing about it, and this is just one of the many pieces of this enormous puzzle that is this game. Also, since I am using clips from the anime, you're probably going to be wondering, can I just watch the anime instead? And to that I say, no, because not only did they not finish it, but it is also ass. So, yeah, let's actually talk about Maria, finally. Maria is the youngest of the Ushiromiya family at just 9 years old. Similarly, her mother Rosa is the youngest of 4 siblings, which basically delegated her to the family punching bag. And her father, well, unlike the other Ushiromiya grandchildren, Maria only has one parent. Maria is a seemingly upbeat girl who likes sweets, magic, and witches. Most of her talking is a bit stilted or slow, as well as having a tendency to repeat things that she's already said or things that have been said to her. She has trouble understanding jokes and reading social situations, is easily goaded into getting really upset by other people, and she also has a vocal flourish, for lack of a better word. And the average person who hasn't read Umineko may hear this and believe these are simply moe traits, but that is absolutely not the case. It's clear that everyone, Rosa especially, is attuned to something being wrong. Rosa will be quick to correct her behavior, especially her oohing, and it's pointed out even in the beginning that she's behind her peers, and for this, she's punished. Severely. I suspect Rosa is also autistic to some degree, as well as some other characters, but due to Maria having difficulty masking, Rosa takes anger out on her for not being normal. Everyone on the island is aware of her disability, and even witnessed the abuse taking place in reaction to this said disability. Instead of helping her, they turn a blind eye, rationalizing it as just a painful but necessary part of her growing up and growing out of her strange mannerisms. That it's nobody else's business on how Rosa decides to parent her own child. There's an unspoken agreement to just never talk about it. Most characters talk down to her in some way, George especially, who's the oldest of the third-generation children. The only one who talks to her as an equal is Badler. So, I think it's pretty fair to say that not only is Maria autistic-coded, but her autism directly impacts the way other characters treat her. Remember that dig at Entrapta I made earlier? No? Well, I guess it'd be normal to wonder why I'm iffy on her, but I'm singing the praises of a character who faces on-screen ableist abuse, and I believe the difference in that is in the framing. Now, it's been a while since I watched She-Ra, but though Entrapta is very relatable, I think her infantilization and her literally being put on a baby leash read more as mockery. And since literally everything in the show is sidelined for the main ship, I feel a lot of the mistreatment she faces is just let off the hook. Meanwhile, not only are the scenes with Maria and her mother some of the most difficult to watch in the entire series, which is saying a lot, not only is Maria's pain taken seriously and even dissected, but these are crucial to the themes of the story. It isn't just child abuse for shock value, but a necessary part of understanding the story of Umineko. Umineko is about a lot of things, but one of the main things it's about is power, and the different ways it manifests. Power through wealth, power through gender, power through age, whatever means they may be, and how the family as an institution further reinforces our worst impulses as humans. Since this is not a video essay about the themes of Umineko, I'm just gonna keep it there. All I want to say is that I feel a lot of these decisions are intentional. So, with that being said, I kind of alluded to there being multiple characters that I suspect as being autistic, and even more controversial than Rosa, I think Kinzo kind of fits the bill. And even if he doesn't, just hear me out on this. Kinzo is the head patriarch of the Ushiromias, and, well, imagine Logan Roy, but if he was somehow worse.
These are my M&Ms, goddammit! Fuck off!
Kinzo is deeply interested in the occult and goes on rants and raves about it. He's also, kind of a Westaboo, to put it mildly. In the beginning, it is pointed out to an almost comical extent how weird the names of these characters are, especially given that they're all Japanese and living in Japan. While the family members believe his proclivities and interests are peculiar, they don't doubt his authority. They, especially his children, have that complicated relationship that any child with an abusive parent has. But, again, even though they view his interests as strange, they still hold him in high regard. Authority and power structure are crucial to the Ushiromias. This is something the text discusses a lot. It even influences their seating arrangements at the dining table. So it comes as no surprise that, even though the oldest male figure is seen as powerful and his interests play a part into his intimidation and reverence, the youngest girl in the family, with the same exact interest and probably being the only person on the island who can rival his knowledge, is repeatedly told to grow up and that witches are for children. And I know there's this weird tendency, even within the autistic community, to believe that autism is a superpower, and I'm not getting into the politics of Aspie supremacy today. But I think one of the things that makes Maria's relationship to her special interest and her autism so interesting is the very realistic way people see it in the game. In a lot of media, you will get the savant trope, someone who's socially inept but is practically a genius in their given field. I'm actually not as opposed to this trope as some other people are. I think it's quite realistic. I mean, autistic people will tend to prefer researching the things that they're interested in rather than socializing with their peers. That's pretty realistic, if I'm being honest. But the way that these characters are treated, in Western media mainly, is that a lot of the time they're recognized as being quirky eccentrics, but crucial to their co-workers. But a lot of the characters who fall under this trope are male and white, and are in STEM or other medical fields. I'm not saying that every white boy with autism has an easy time. That's very far from reality. Again, I am not getting into the politics of autistic discrimination within this video, but while savants in fiction of different genders and backgrounds are awesome, I think the approach they take with Maria is really interesting and valuable as well. Maria is pointed out to be struggling in school for some subjects, as well as not having any friends, and for this, she's called stupid. And look, Even if she was intellectually disabled or quote-unquote stupid, whatever that means in the context of a 9-year-old, she would not deserve any of the insults and abuse she faces. I want that to be clear. And again, the intellectual prowess of a 9-year-old does not fucking matter in the grand scheme of things. With all of that said, though, her being called stupid is literally just a lie. It is not completely unheard of for someone to learn entire new languages because of their special interest, and Maria is one of those people. Maria is interested in learning other languages. She is able to speak and read English better than the rest of her entire family, including the adults, and she's also able to read some Hebrew. Learning a language at any age is really impressive, but her having Japanese as a mother tongue and learning anything about 2 languages which both have different and separate roots from Japanese is pretty impressive. What's funny, though, is that her special interest in the occult could be very useful in this situation. There's somebody going around the island literally murdering everyone and doing some edgy Wicca shit around their bodies, but other than indulging in Maria's info dumps, nobody listens to what she has to say or any suggestions that she gives. And for those who don't know, special interests are usually years-long and sometimes lifelong interests that autistic people tend to have. They go above and beyond a regular passion, though, because these fixations tend to be our lenses or tools for understanding the world around us. For autistic people who experience special interests, they are crucial to our well-being for this exact reason, as it makes navigating and making sense of the world not just easier, but possible. Trying to remove a special interest from an autistic person to make them more normal, whatever that means, as is the goal for ABA, to me, reads like trying to rip away part of someone's soul. And the fact that this is considered a necessary part of autistic people assimilating into neurotypical society, so they're less annoying or whatever, and not as a deeply abusive and inhumane practice, is a problem. And this to me is where Umineko shines. I feel most people would view the way in which Rosa treats her daughter as cruel, which is true, but they would not see the fundamental problem that she has. If she were to go about making her daughter normal in a manner in which they personally did not view as violent, they'd be okay with it. That maybe hitting her is too far, but that, yeah, she should grow up and change as a person. But since Umineko is based, it says that this is the fundamentally incorrect way to not just approach Maria as a character, but literally life itself. And before I elaborate on that further and get into some spoilery stuff, I do want to talk about more of Maria's symptoms and a bit about Ryukishi 07 himself. I personally love autistic coded characters or headcanons. Might make a video in the future discussing that, but there are limitations to that way of writing. Yes, you can get very valuable representation from that, but there can be missing pieces in some cases. And I'm just gonna yap a bit about some various little autistic things about Maria that I like. I mentioned earlier, but Maria seems to speak in a stilted and almost confused manner a vast majority of the time, except when she's talking about her special interest, where she's clear, concise, almost professional in the way she speaks. I really enjoy this detail. For me, most of the time, it feels like I'm lagging or on dial-up, but when I talk about my special interests, I feel clearer and it feels like everything works and falls into place. I also really like the fact that she has echolalia, which is a speech disorder where you repeat things either you yourself say or that someone else says. I've never seen a character in my life who has this, and as someone who used to have to deal with it, it's really cool to see. She also tends to carry a bunch of stuff with her, usually a bunch of magical objects or her notebook, which, okay, she's just like me for real. Now, even if autistic isn't the word that they use in game, I believe this was Ryukishi's intention. Apparently before being a writer, he was a civil servant and a social worker, and a lot of his experiences doing that reflect in his body of work. I have not read Higurashi yet, which is the first in the When They Cry series, but this game goes into the ways in which children are abused, especially neurodivergent or weird kids, and are ignored and failed by the adults in their environment, as well as social services who are supposed to help them. And the cycles of abuse and violence are similar in Umineko. I can only speak for Umineko, but I feel that this is handled well. Okay, for the most part. I said that there's anime shit in here, which is mostly positive, but it is a little jarring seeing a work like Umineko that is very textually about the way in which structural misogyny destroys women, but has a bunch of weird-ass fan service that almost feels like it takes away from the message of the game, but you just gotta ignore it. Just ignore it. Alright, so this is the part where I spoil basically the whole game, so I would encourage you skip to here if you have any interest in reading Umineko. Thank you. Okay, now that everyone's gone, can I say that I was really taken aback by the Godatrist reveal? At first, I wasn't really into it, but it's kind of grown on me since then. Masterful gambit, Ryukishi. Okay, seriously, get out if you don't want spoilers. Maria is, in many ways, the key to Umineko. The mystery, the story, the message, everything. To understand Umineko and the themes it is trying to convey, to understand magic, the deep blue of the ocean, you need to understand Maria. Without Maria, it cannot be seen. Maria's crown resembles that of a chess king piece. Since Umineko is essentially a mental game of chess, this means that Maria is Beato's piece that needs to be guarded the most for her to win. All of Beato's strategies, then, can be viewed as a way of protecting Maria. The young girl is granted more importance and shielding from harm in this game after her death than she ever was granted in her short and tragic life. Notice how episode 5 is the only chapter of the game where Maria dies in the first Twilight and they can't complete it. Notice how both original bottles written by Sayo are not only dictated through Maria's perspective, but she always survives until the end. At the end of the day, the Rakanjima massacre was essentially a suicide pact between Sayo and Maria. They both likely didn't see it that way. They truly thought they'd live on into the Golden Land, but that's what it ended up being. Even with this importance, it's clear that she takes on a Cassandra role in the narrative. The Rose scene hammers this in incredibly early. She is right, but she is doomed to never be listened to. Needless to say, by the end of episode 7, I felt super vindicated for having locked the fuck in whenever Maria had to say anything. But honestly, I felt that way even before then. Episode 4 is probably my favorite part of Umineko alongside 7. Basic, I know. And it's essentially a clash in ideologies between Maria and Aj. I'm sadly cursed with French, so that's why I say her name like that, I'm sorry. Aj in both 4 and 8 has to grapple with this conflict of ideas. Choosing to not agree with Maria, taking a pessimistic and logic route, literally puts you on Erica's path and gives you the bad ending. Choosing that yes, magic did make the candy disappear is the only way in which Anj can move on and have a fulfilling life. I mentioned earlier about special interest being a way of processing the world around you, and everything in the game not only points to Maria's special interest, one that she is mocked for, bullied, and beaten down for, that everyone who does that is wrong. That she has more answers than them. One of the most tragic scenes in the entire game is the part where Aj goes to the island and Sumidera follows and torments her. To truly try to break her niece, she goes through Maria's grimoire, laughing at and mocking all of the pages in it, tearing them out. And it's just heartbreaking. It's difficult. It's horrible. Especially when she gets to Maria's incantation for being friends with her mother. It's the oohing, and just the way in which Avatris and Sumidera mock it just feels exactly the way that anyone would make fun of a disabled child. Alright, look, this is the part where I get personal. I was a pretty eccentric kid, and early on, not only did I clock that I was different, but my parents did as well. However, they were actively discouraged by doctors from looking into it. Growing up became a lot harder when my eccentricities were seen as a nuisance. At echolalia, I'd extensively talk about my special interests, I got into a lot of misunderstandings, I had trouble reading the room and controlling my emotions. I grew to resent a lot of stories that I had read and watched growing up, messages saying, be yourself, because I was not able to safely be myself. I couldn't. I wasn't allowed to. The way I expressed my happiness was inconvenient, annoying, or weird to other people, and they treated me quite terribly for it. At some point, I internalized that I was not allowed to be happy. Eventually, I was at the crossroad decision that every autistic person has to make. Kill a part of yourself to become normal and try getting into less conflict, or being yourself and dealing with the nightmare that it is trying to assimilate into normal society. I chose the former. I was tired. I basically had to correct myself into thinking down on the parts of myself that were abnormal to discourage it. I had to correct myself behind closed doors, and even by myself, I couldn't be myself. And it was a bad choice to make, because I'm pretty terrible at being normal. I finally got diagnosed in my mid to late teens, and by that point, I already knew I was autistic. Yeah, it felt pretty good of being right, but I felt a lot of mixed emotions. Even with the diagnosis, I still felt that my struggles weren't listened to. Fast forward to over a year and a half ago, I began reading Umineko with one of my best friends. He had already read it and loved it and talked about it a lot, and one day I said fuck it and just decided to start and read it with him. Eventually we would read it over Discord when I had to go back to college, and this was during one of the darkest periods in my life. But I had my friend, and I had Umineko. I practically spent all the time I could reading it on call with him. talking about theories and all of that. That's part of the reason it took so long. But even very early on, in Maria, I saw my ideal, my old self. I saw that maybe that part of me hadn't actually died. In her, I saw a role model, as strange as it is, who had all her quirks, her eccentricities. I could be me. I could manage it somehow. And I guess ever since I've seen Maria, I've been trying to be like her, to bring that part of my old self back, and I think it's working. Umineko has given me a lot of hope, and if I had not been reading Umineko with my friend at that time, I genuinely don't know if I'd still be here. As much as I appreciate autistic representation that has characters be able to live as themselves freely and not have to face the regular hurdles that we do, I think this is the most valuable type of representation that shows us, yes, facing hardship, but that we can be ourselves anyways, that it is worth it to be yourself, and that it is a strength, not a weakness, to continue existing as who you are.